Lapse the steering wheel here. Give me the steering wheel. Hey, steering wheel. Somebody tell him to give it to him. Come on. Whoa.
Your leg, mate, please. Your leg.
How the f*** is this possible?
I'm driving like a grandma. Get that, Ralph. Did you hear me? From our radio. Ralph, acknowledge. Now, come on, close him down and kill him. We've got a lunatic on the track down the interstate. Annoyed.
Hello and welcome back inside the Park from A for podcast number 879. Dangerously close to 880. I don't know what kind of milestone that is. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now.
AKA Negative Camera. You know why I've asked you here.
You must convince the villagers that I'm harmless.
That's exactly what I need you to do. Tonight, we're going to talk about Red Bull, Christian Horner, Max Verstappen, Helmut Marko, Jos, the boss, Toto, Audi, and Lando Norris, the patron saint of comfortable cars. We're going to be talking about that and all kinds of other things, and we're going to be doing it with our patron supporters who are here in the audience with us, chatting away, and Miller 10, that's 2015, 2016, that's right. So you can join us for the recordings of these if you're a patron supporter. Every Monday when we record, we send out a link, and you can be part of the audience too and chat directly to us. You just kind of chat. You know how you do that. So anyway, before doing that, I have to introduce my co-host tonight. You guys know what that means. Oh yeah, you like that groove? You know that groove because that groove epitomizes how cool she is, nestled in the East Coast of our nation's capital, where she plies her skills as some sort of master of the universe. Who knows? She has the world's largest cat tree. You gotta love that. The lovely, the redoubtable Grace! Grace, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Todd. It's been a while. I feel a little out of practice, but
I know, it has been a while.
It's back to backs, man. They're crushing my podcasting skills.
I know. We had all those races back to back, and Paul just went down to Sebring this weekend and had both cars in the top 5 finish, which was good.
Excellent.
Yeah, it was good for him.
Yeah.
I question the BOP for that number 57 Mercedes. That's all I'm going to say. Paul didn't say that. That's just me. All right, that's what I'm saying.
Just,
Yeah, treading light. So, Grace, I have a serious question for you before we dive into the Formula One news here.
All right, no pressure.
All right. He has finished top 5 in both the sprint race and the actual race on a bike he's never ridden before. How do you see the prospects for Marc Marquez? And more to the point, as Nick Harris would say, does anybody have anything for Marc Marquez? What do you think?
Oh, well, I think this is... Ziggy, we've been here for 5 seconds. Cat's already chomping on the cords. Anyway, of course, I feel like you won it, right? Like, because he's been injured. Yeah. He had all the problems at Honda. I mean, we're going to Austin, so if he's going to do well, it's Austin and Sachsenring, his 2 tracks. So it was like, who do we think is going to win Austin? Well, it could be Marc Marquez, and that would be pretty spectacular. I think it's kind of, like, we talk about Sebastian Vettel, like, and I was one of those people, like, I hated him. Oh, you like bees? I like you. You pick up trash? I like you, right? Like this, like the end of his career, Sebastian Vettel, I liked way more than I liked the beginning of his career, Sebastian Vettel. Right. I feel that same way about Marc Marquez, right? There's like, not my favorite, right? And then it's like, but now it's like such a, how good is he going to be? He's racing with his brother. He looked very promising in the first race. And I think that he's still being very realistic about his chances. So I think he's been very like, well, we'll see how it goes. He's been very sort of cautious about it. But I think Austin, he'll look great. I'm here for that.
I thought it was good. Every time I see that Rob McElhenney guy now, I keep thinking he looks like Marc Marquez. I know it's his eyes, something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Just me.
I will also share that I watched Beyond the Grid. Oh, see, I'm not prepared. I didn't. So
with Albon.
Yes, but after that, because YouTube just keeps on going. Yeah. So I listened to the Albon, and then Sergio Perez's came on. I was like, oh, all right, sure. I'm like folding laundry or whatever. I'll listen to this. And he talked about meeting Marc Marquez, and that he got to sit on Marc's bike. Because they asked him, they're like, did he let you ride it? He's like, oh no, nobody let me ride that. I'm like, yeah, nobody should let you ride that, man. Like that's not a criticism of your skill level, Sergio.
Yeah, we saw what happened when Schumacher rode a bike.
Yeah, like that's not good. But I just think that would be kind of crazy. And they kind of talked about like, talking to Marc Marquez about riding a bike, right? It's pretty cool.
Right.
So.
Oh boy. All right.
So I'm here for it. I'm here for Marc Marquez.
Yeah.
And if you would have
too.
asked me this like 7 years ago, I would have been like, really? I don't know, maybe. But
Maybe he'll be like Corey Feldman. He's the comeback king. Who knows?
Although I also put out there, if you, I think and maybe it's MotoGP, but one of the podcasts, because they all blend together, has Jorge Lorenzo sits in on the podcast. It's hilarious. Like, he's just like, first of all, he always is like dressed to the nines. Like, he's going to a club. Like, he is stopping here to do this podcast for 20 minutes and then he is off to the clubs. He always is like, very dressed to the nines. And then he's just like delivers some entertaining wisdom and then moves on with his life, which I'm also like, who are you? Old man, Jorge Lorenzo. Old man being that he's like, 30 or something. But I
loved watching Jorge race though.
Yeah. So in retirement, also very entertaining. But I think it's kind of like I watched, this is like all not Formula One, but watching Reggie Miller now does a lot of the commentary for NBA. Yeah. And Reggie Miller, who's a notorious trash talker, when he played, was commenting about another player's trash talk. And Chris Webber was just like, Reggie Miller, did you just say that guy's trash talk is over a line? Like, I don't know, man. So I think there's something about like retirement players or retirement riders that is a different kind of entertainment than when they were in the sport.
Nobody trash talk like Larry Bird, though.
Larry Bird is on a different level. That guy was just like, I loved it. I loved
to watch. I grew up watching Larry Bird. He was awesome.
It's just like, it's the basketball version of the guy or person that can play pool that's just like, I'm going to hit this ball into that corner, right?
Exactly.
He's just like, watch this. Yeah. Oh, yeah, over there? Watch this. It was amazing. That sort of just...
It was like my dad with golf. He was a scratch golfer, and he'd do anything he wanted to do with I didn't get that gene. I mowed grass with a 9-iron, basically. So, but yeah, it's just calling all the shots. It's hilarious. So, hey, speaking of not F1...
Yeah.
Did you happen to notice that NASCAR had its Canadian Grand Prix tire issue race this weekend?
I didn't.
It was at Bristol, Grace, and the tires were just delaminating and wearing off.
I was very confused. I'm like, Bristol is not in Canada.
No. The tires were wearing, too fast, and they almost ran out of tires. Goodyear had to go back in the truck and start mounting more tires for the teams during the race because the tires were just falling off in chunks. And so, but what it did, just like the Canadian Grand Prix of years ago, it produced some really exciting racing, right? So after this all happens, there's all of these people on social media is like, okay, NASCAR needs to figure out what happened there because that was the most exciting NASCAR race I've seen in years, and they gotta come up with a tire that's that they have to manage tires
falls off, right?
Yeah. And I'm feverishly tweeting, don't do it, don't do it. We did this because of Canada, and look where we are. Do not go down this slippery slope, please.
Nope. Just take this one race and live with it.
Just make a Goodyear tire that's good for the race and go. Do not follow F1 on this HD tire thing.
I just think the idea of them like, hey, is the Flex Seal guy here? I think he was outside, right? Could we get him? Because we could use some of that Flex Seal duct tape stuff,
well, you could just get the tape, Yeah.
I mean, it can build a bathtub into a submarine. For sure it can fix these tires, right?
Well, yeah, you would think it could, right? You can drill holes in things and... I don't know. You can do a lot of things with Flex Seal.
I'm just saying, fix them tires right up. Flex Seal it.
I'm all for it. Okay, let's talk about some Formula One news. Now, the Red Bull drama, I know there's a lot of you out there that are following this as closely as you were, like a 1986 episode of All My Children with Susan Lucci, and you were confounded why it took Susan Lucci 12 times to get a daytime Emmy, but that's a different conversation. I know that's important to you, and you're following the Red Bull drama just like that. And instead of me trying to paraphrase the venerable an upstanding F1 motorsport news site, Autosport. I'm going to read it to you. So hat tip, Autosport on this. These are not my words. They're theirs. And they did a fine job of word crafting this because they're all wonderful men and women over there. So here's what the article says about the current state of the Red Bull drama. According to the BBC, this is Autosport quoting BBC, the Red Bull staff member who accused team boss Christian Horner of misconduct has reportedly lodged a complaint against Horner to the FIA and appealed her Red Bull suspension. Last week, Red Bull Racing has suspended the female member of staff who made the complaint against Horner. On Saturday, the BBC reported that the employee in question would be lodging a complaint to the ethics committee of the F1 governing body, the FIA, regarding Horner's behavior. The BBC also claimed her complaint follows, quote, 2 previous whistleblower complaints registered with the FIA in the past few weeks, end quote. Both relating to Horner's behavior and Red Bull's investigation into it. Red Bull has not given a public reason as to why the original grievance was dismissed. It has not divulged the identity of the barrister behind the investigation, nor, so far, shared its findings with key parties like F1 or the FIA. So, no public reason was given for the complainant's suspension either. Prior to the dismissal of the grievance, the FIA said it would, quote, reserve detailed comments until the investigation concludes. In the wake of the BBC's report and the complaint had lodged, or that the complainant had lodged a complaint to the FIA released the following statement. So here's what the FIA said about receiving that complaint. Quote, at the FIA, inquiries and complaints are received and managed by the compliance officer and the ethics committee where appropriate. Both bodies operate autonomously, guaranteeing strict confidentiality throughout the process. As a consequence, and in general, we are unable to confirm the receipt of any specific complaint, and it is unlikely that we'll be able to provide further comment on the complaints that we may receive from any parties. If the complainant has lodged a complaint with the FIA, then it will potentially force the FIA to address the matter in some way, whether that be through some kind of action or inaction, end quote. That is the most current thing that I've read so far on the whole Red Bull thing.
Basically, that's like 27,000 words to say, we're not going to do anything.
I don't know.
Maybe. I like this, I don't know, maybe we'll do something. Maybe we won't do something. Maybe it's not doing something is us doing something.
Maybe we didn't get a complaint. Maybe we did. Maybe we didn't. You don't know.
This is like some circular logic here. Well, you know.
The whole thing is just so weird. How does a team boss get tangled up in all this junk? And then how does a I don't know, this next story we talk about, I think even adds more light on this whole thing, you know. If you go back a year when Dietrich died, we even said back then that it could get interesting at Red Bull.
Yeah, because
the reason is because the Taiwanese, I think is he Thai? The other owner? I think he's 51% owner, where
correct.
Dietrich and team were 49, right?
Right. That's correct.
So there's this big power struggle that Dietrich, a big vacuum left by Dietrich, right?
He was the flex seal that held all these pieces together.
He was. He absolutely was. So when you look at that, it was maybe inevitable that there's just too much money involved in everything over there, and there's a lot of power struggle going on at Red Bull, and how much of this is real, how much of it is potentially, trying to publicly humiliate. I don't know. I don't know. If the texts are real, well, obviously he was having conversations. So who knows?
I mean, I think the thing is we all have to keep in mind there's the sort of central story here that you're speaking to, right? Employee files complaint. Red Bull does black box. Employee gets suspended. Employee goes to the FIA. Black box, right?
Yeah.
So that's sort of like the through line. But where you're like Charlie Day, yarn ball and thumbtacks comes in is all the other peripheral stories that are now coming out of this. And so you never should lose that key story because that's absolutely the most important part. But now it's like first of all, when they were like, pictures, details got emailed to all the team principals, the news media, and Jos Verstappen. And then Jos Verstappen is totally like, who, I'm just going to put that out there, doesn't strike me as like, the leader of women's rights as a human being, right?
No, I think he got in trouble for roughing a woman up. Yes.
So I think there's something that when that's a headline, first of all, when you see a headline, I always think, is this The Onion? Or whatever the F1 version of The Onion is, right? Like, Jos Verstappen, right? Like, and then now it's like Game of Thrones and everybody's little finger. Like, chaos is a ladder, and now we learn what Max Verstappen's contract is tied to Helmut Marko. Why would that be a thing? I've never thought of like, well, I'm only going to work here because Todd's my boss, and if Todd's not going to be my boss, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And Helmut Marko is an employee of Red Bull, not like the drink company, right? Like, not of the Formula One team, which all complicates everything. And I think all these little, like, every time, right, the Charlie Day yarn ball, and you get some more thumbtacks, and it's just like,
I know,
who knew this team, of which they're the only team I think in the modern era, and at least the 20 years I've watched, that have had 2 successful stints in Formula One, right? So we talk about how, you're successful in a rule period chunk, right? They've had 2 of those. And they're the only team in sort of modern existence of the last 20 years that have had that. And people are picking sides about whether or not to keep Christian Horner or not.
Yeah.
That to me was like, I may not like the guy, but that's different than he makes my team successful, right?
Yeah.
There are plenty of people I work with that I may not like them. Now, that is, not liking them is different than sexual harassment. I do want to make that clear. But, you cannot like somebody and they can do great things for your company. So I just think that's all like all this little discovery stuff that's kind of happening around it, that it's just who knew all these things that we're learning out about Red Bull?
Well, and I think you're right. It started as sort of, okay, well, there's an employee that complained. Okay, so that's an HR issue. It's an internal issue. They do an investigation with an independent third party and a lawyer. Yeah. And they did their investigation and dropped it. And you're like, okay, well, what were the complaints valid? Was there, was there any, texting or sexting, as they call it, back and forth? Was it one way? Was it him in a very inappropriate conversation with someone who's under him, which is horribly inappropriate? Was it was that person reciprocating or baiting him? Who knows? You have no idea what's going on there. It's not, they didn't talk about any of that, and nor would they. It's a private company, and they had their own investigation. So then they announced that, and 24 hours later, all these texts come out. Well, clearly, if those are legit, there is these communications. So how many did they release? All the texts, or just the ones that were, that could be read as being, untoward? I don't know. So nobody knows because there's no detail on this. Right. But to your point, Grace, so you've got the thumbtacks and yarn. It's like a never-ending episode of Broadchurch or something. You're trying to figure out what the hell, who did what. Right. And then all of a sudden you get the helmet, like you said, the Helmut Marko thread, and then you've got a thread going over to Jos, which is really weird. And there's some talk that the gal was actually with Jos, and so there's this love triangle thing going on, and then this whole weird thing. But this next story, I think, even adds a little bit more interesting flavor. So again, Grace, in your analogy, we're going to add another thumbtack and another big piece of yarn on this that starts to chisel away all of the, chisel away the stone to reveal the real power struggle that's going on in this team.
Correct.
And it's regarding Max Verstappen's contract. And again, I'm gonna read this from Autosport from Jonathan Noble, who wrote this. So hat tip Autosport and Jonathan, who does a great job. It said about Max Verstappen's contract in 2022, he signed a long-term deal, multi-year long-term deal. And we've often talked about Formula One contracts. They have some exit clauses, performance clauses, could be X clause. Lewis Hamilton did a 2-year deal with Mercedes. Clearly, he had an exit clause and executed it immediately, right after that first year. So he's still got a year left on his contract, but he already executed the exit clause. So there are exit clauses, but a lot of those are around performance of either the team delivering for the driver or the driver delivering the team, those kind of things. But what's interesting is Jonathan Noble at Autosport said that, in digging around with sources, they found out that Max's has an exit clause that is tied to the Helmut Marko. So you remember last week when they interviewed Max, and he says, well, yeah, I mean, if Helmut stays, if he's not staying, then everybody at the team knows that I'm not staying. Helmut's got to be here. We have a close relationship. If they get rid of him, then they're getting rid of me because I won't stay, right? And that was a pretty strong warning across the bow. So it's interesting now as Autosport got to digging around. Here's what Autosport had to say about it. They said, what is perhaps most intriguing about this exit clause, which now is they believe, tied to Helmut Marko. So if Helmut gets booted, then that triggers an exit clause for Max. So that's why they said Max said this in Saudi. So they said what's perhaps most intriguing about this Marko exit clause is that according to sources, it was not part of the original contract that Verstappen and Red Bull signed back in 2022. Now get this. Instead, it is understood that the clause forms part of an addendum to the contract that was added more recently. And even more intriguingly, it has been revealed by insiders that this addition or addendum to the original contract was put in place unilaterally by the Verstappens and Marko without Red Bull's F1 team nor Horner knowing anything about it at the time. And it said Marko was able to do this because he is one of the two directors of Red Bull Racing, so is able to act on the team's behalf. The existence of this clause only appears to have become common knowledge in recent weeks when Verstappen's future became a topic of public debate and the presence of the clause was mentioned openly. Now, I find that astounding. And I do too. I have no reason to doubt Jonathan Noble on this. He's a top flight F1 journo and reporter.
Yeah, right.
But this is a very, very odd move for Helmut and Max to do this under the radar of the team and the team boss. And it smacks of having some Jos Verstappen involved there too. And it also, to me, seems a bit dodgy, if true, that Max and Helmut would amend the contract in what can only be seen by me as a very opportunistic and draconian move for both of them and their longevity at the expense of the team. It's amazing if that happened. Wow. I who knew? Like, of all, if you had said, Grace, guess what? That is never what I would have guessed. I know.
What? It was just, to me, very surprising. And that, I don't know, that would be, I don't know. It was just, I found it kind of, I just would never think of something like that in any profession, right? Like I was saying, like, I've never been like, well, I only work there if Todd also works there. I don't know. Like, that's, usually you just work there. And you're right. People do have performance clauses for sure. But it's usually, again, based on performance, not on if Adrian Newey goes, I'm also going. Like, that's, yeah. It just seemed like a very weird thing that.
So strange.
That is, and that's the, I don't know, that's the horse he's picked.
If that's true, I have a whole different view of the Verstappen Marko camp. I'll be honest with you. I think, and maybe there's some legitimate reason. This was done before this whole texting and allegation thing happened. Right. So it seems to me like if it was done last year, that this power struggle sort of thing, this was a way of protecting Helmut Marko. Because if he got dropped, then Max could leave. And it basically is, it's not blackmail, but it's basically a threat, you know?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Because
so,
why
yeah.
would you fire him now? There's no way you'll fire him.
No, you want to keep Max, you know?
Yes.
And I don't know, there's a part of me that thinks, well, if Christian is tight with the 51% owner.
Right. The Thai family. Mm-hmm.
And the 51% owner says, look, I don't care what's going on. Christian's my guy because he's the guy that built this team. And he's the guy that brought, 4 championships with Vettel and now 3 with Max. And you know what? Helmut and Max can go. We'll find somebody else. So what? It ebbs and flows.
Right? Like, I mean, it was absolutely. And that this is where this lays. I mean, it reminded me similar of when we were talking about Felipe Massa's lawsuit. And it's like, I don't want that because I don't think Felipe Massa is going to win. It seems, but what do I know? But I do want us to go to Discovery. Like, there's so much I want to know, right?
I know.
And there's like, the more every day this stuff comes out, and it's just like, what are you guys doing over there? And the thing is that if the allegations are true, it's not usually a one-off. It's never a one-off, right? And so this may be something that internally people have known about.
Could be.
And other behaviors of Christian Horner that people brush off or accept or, it's kind of the opposite of the like kooky professor kind of idea. Like, wow, he left his coffee on the roof of his car, but he's a genius, right? Like, he's a genius, but inappropriate. Why
does he have these photos of his female students? Don't know.
Right. And so, but people may probably have known, and they were just waiting for that moment. So it could be that the clause went in,
maybe.
And then this is,
Yeah, maybe.
It became more public.
Here's my solution. All of this is dragging on, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, what a soap opera, right? If I'm F1 and I'm Stefano Domenicali, and the FIA now are involved with their own investigation. Right. I would tell Eddie Everywhere to get his butt in a plane and get up to France or wherever
Figure it out.
FIA is, or get to London or wherever Stefano's is. And I would sit down with him and say, hey, this thing is killing us. And this is dominating even what's happening on track. So here is, I think, Stefano and Eddie Everywhere need to get together with the majority shareholder of Red Bull and say, hey, okay, look, let's put this over to the side for now, and we'll go figure this out and figure out the investigation, and we'll come to conclusion, and that'll take time. But I don't want the entire series to live in the penumbra of this drama, right? And so what I would recommend is that they make Jonathan Wheatley the interim team boss, put Christian on ice for a year until they can figure out what's going on and who did what and what's going on and the investigation. He's not fired or anything, but just put him over, leave him
cups and paper
Milton
plates
Keynes and let him do CEO things, but let Jonathan and just get back to racing and get the drama out of the public, eye at this point, and let that process, the FI investigation, the appeal, and let that whole process work itself out. But they won't do that, but that's what I would do.
So then that means that Jonathan Wheatley is Littlefinger, and this was his plan all along, because who else has the email? We know he has the email of every principal, all the media, and Jos Verstappen.
Yeah. And one of our patrons, Miller Time, said this, and it's a great point, and I agree with him. It said, I'm really interested in what Red Bull's board of directors for the soft drinks division think of this, because it could cause some negative publicity for the product. People like to cancel products quickly these days through social media, and you're absolutely right. You know, if there's this view of impropriety that Christian was abusive and those kind of things, it's now social media has a backlash and can, and to your point, Millard, I think there already was a sort of hashtag boycott Red Bull. They convicted even before the investigation was over. But that's just the knee-jerk reaction of social media. But yeah, at some point, you got to think about selling cans of energy drinks.
Plus, Red Bull, like if you go to their website, they're literally in 7 million things.
They are.
And so it's not like we might all be sad if Red Bull pulled out of Formula One or motorsports altogether, because it's also not like Red Bull is their only, motorsports team they sponsor, right? They're all over the place. And so if they pulled out of motorsports, they clearly have every other thing they're in that they could still be selling their fizzy beverages at. And I think it could become Renault, right? Like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And the board of directors is like, well, we're not here for this anymore. And out they go, right?
Yeah, I think it would be hard because they've made such a big investment in a tie-in with the new engine group. To make the new engine for 2026, they've tied up with Ford, all of that stuff. They've got to make all of this go away.
Yes, because Ford has said, now that you mentioned it, maybe we don't want to do this anymore. Thanks.
Yeah, Ford's like, okay, well, wait a minute. And to our Patriot Military, to his point, it's not just Red Bull. Ford's worried about the backlash and the brand equity damage that might be done by this lingering on, too, with Chris Farley's cousin. What's his name? I can't remember. Every time I see him, it's Chris Farley. Jim Farley. Saying, hey, how about some transparency? What the hell's going on over there in Austria, right? So, yeah, the whole thing is weird, but that's the latest. But to that point, that whole contract thing,
that
seems really, that
was weird.
Sus. It's very sus. And I think that's one of Grace's yarns and thumbtacks right there.
And you're right. And there are several triangles around Yas. Who knows?
Yeah, Yas, I don't know, man. Max needs to think about that. Jos Verstappen at this point is making Anthony Hamilton seem like a reserved, quiet, uninvolved father.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Remember, this is the guy that got all the money, and they gave him a Porsche supercar, and he crashed it into a children's playground, and thank God there were no kids in there, and went crazy and had Lewis flying over Turkish operas, and then he went and he was going to be a driver manager, and he screwed up or allegedly screwed up Paul di Resta's career. PDR sued him over it. This guy was like, whoa, and now Yas is making that look tame. And it might be good for Max to remember, wait a minute, this is the SOB that kicked me out of the car at a gas station and left me because I did bad in karting.
But I mean, it's his father, right? He's certainly Stockholm syndrome, right? Like he's definitely internalized that this is how it works, right? So
yeah, Max, you got to think about that, Max. Think about it. Give it some thought here.
Yes,
Lewis had to do, and I commend Lewis for this, it was getting out of control. And Lewis knew it. Do you remember the year that he forcibly separated from his father?
Yeah.
And
slowly
and basically fired his dad from being the manager and went. Do you remember that? It was a big deal, and there were some hurt feelings and some rifts that has taken a long time for Lewis and Anthony to reconcile. A few years, and thankfully they have. And I think if you asked Anthony, he probably would agree that was probably what was best for Lewis and Lewis's career. And so I'm kind of curious if Max might be in that situation. But anyway,
to get rid of Jos Verstappen, I don't know. I don't know. Anthony Hamilton was sort of like, okay, that's what you want. Okay, it doesn't make me happy, but I guess I'll go. I don't know that Jos Verstappen's just going to be like, okay. I mean, I don't see that happening.
He may show up at Max's trailer with a lightweight McCullen, ripping the door off and coming in with a shotgun.
Sounds,
the guy. I don't know.
Sounds consistent. Yes. I
Does
think,
that comport? It comports.
Yes. Would anybody be surprised? No.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know. I just think that it's every day, like sands to the hourglass is very perplexing. What is going on over there?
It's the days of our lives.
It's never
It's the young and the restless. All right. Audi. Let's talk about Audi.
Sure. Because it's a slightly less soap opera. I mean, it's not, I mean, as far as we know, there are no proprietary, and that's not a word,
Inappropriate?
Sure, we'll go with inappropriate. I don't think that's the word I was going for either, but that works. Inappropriate behavior going on at Audi, but, it's a little less of a soap opera, but still, a little.
But there is some, as Paul might say, controversy.
There is a little controversy going on over there at Audi.
Right. So when Audi announced that they would purchase 25% of Sauber and enter F1 in 2026, they did this a couple of years ago. They still have quite a bit of time for the dust to settle on this news. And so much dust settled on it that some started to suggest that maybe Audi was getting cold feet about the idea. Now, that seems unfounded, as now it's been reported that Audi will now accelerate their program and buy not just 75%, which was the initial, they're going to accelerate and buy 100% of Sauber. And there are legit reasons for doing that now and accelerating the program. You and I have talked about this. Mm-hmm. Paul and I have talked about this in just not too long ago, that it's from the outside looking in, it has been very difficult to see any fingerprints of Audi on this team in the last 2 seasons. So Audi moving more aggressively into this team makes sense. Now, there's a financial reason that makes sense. I don't think I went over the regulation changes in our season preview podcast, but when I did the local season preview that I do every year here, I did have a list of all the changes. One of the changes is around CapEx investment. So let me explain that. And if you know this, I'm patronizing you, and apology. Just bear with me here for those that don't. So the CapEx regulation change is an increase in the amount of money a team can spend over a 4-year period on critical infrastructure capital expenditures like equipment, autoclaves, whatever, wind tunnels, whatever it might be that they need to be a first-class racing fabrication, team, right? And there is a the guys over at The Race did a nice video. It may have came out today about Williams being designed on an Excel spreadsheet.
It was great.
Did you watch it? Yeah.
We watched that over dinner. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was it's not long, so you can go watch that. I think it's Mitchell mommed. And he goes through and talks about, do you remember, and Paul was right. We said this a few weeks ago before that video ever came out. We said the first year that James was there, he got the low-hanging fruit picked up off the floor. Yeah. And that had an immediate impact. But now, remember Charsley said, now you're beyond the low-hanging fruit. Now you're going to get into the gratuitous details that take serious consideration, thought, and investment to fix, right? You remember he said that a few podcasts ago? Well, that's exactly what this video talks about, as The Race called it, the winter of their discontent. But it kind of was. Their infrastructure is outdated. Their cataloging and logging of inventory is all done on Excel spreadsheets. They can't find the things they're looking for. They have to do manual checks in the warehouse to figure it out. And for 1,000 employees, it's unsustainable. And to the point where James Val says, I never want to go through that again. So he knew that this was the case, and these are the details that Charsley was talking about a few weeks ago, that he's facing some serious issues. Now, this regulation change is meant for teams like that. So it used to be $45 million was allowed over a 4-year period, with the bottom 5 teams getting that. Okay.
Right. So
this is going to reward the teams that are at the bottom of the grid because they tend to be underfunded for growth. And so this 45, well, that's been increased to 65 million. And where is Sauber? At the very bottom. So if Audi comes in now and buys 100%, they get the $65 million of CapEx, right? So it behooves them to do that so they can take that $65 million, put that towards their infrastructure for their engine program for 2026 or their chassis program in Hinwell and their facilities. So it makes sense for Audi to engage and buy 100% sooner than later because they'd be able to capitalize on that. So it makes total sense of why they would do it. Instead of waiting until 2025-2026, that doesn't make as much sense. So this does, and I'm glad that they're doing it because they do need to get Audi on the side of that car. They own a portion of the team. You need to get Audi on the side of that. Well, I don't know who Stake F1 is, but they need to get Audi on that car. So the other thing is the big question. Well, before I jump to the final question about drivers, Grace, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was going to say also they need to jump in there because if Williams is running their team with a Excel spreadsheet, I'm not sure how far away Sauber, / Stake F1.
They may be on Monday.com.
Yeah, I was thinking like an access database, right? Like, I mean,
maybe they switched to Microsoft Loop finally.
So I'm just saying, I'm not sure they're running much higher than an Excel spreadsheet over there at Stick F1. So, get in there soon, figure things out. And I think too, that's what kind of led to the cold feet rumors. I agree. There was nothing really where Audi came out and said that, but I'm sure this isn't the look they really wanted either, like, oh, you're about to buy these not so great loser team. Great. Yeah. Right? Like, that's not going to help you out either. You're Audi, right? And we've been talking about, for what I feel like has been my entire lifetime, about them getting into Formula One. So it makes sense for them to get in now, both to save some face and to rake in that CapEx money, as you noted. Yeah. So,
well, and it is true, Grace, if you're newer to the podcast, since 2005, 1,000 podcasts ago, Grace and I, there was always these recurring rumors that Audi was going to maybe come into F1. And that's been happening for a decade and a half, almost 2 decades.
So maybe not my lifetime, but like Ollie Behrman's lifetime. They've been talking about getting into the sport, right?
For sure. So now it looks as if it's finally happening and more power to them. So this leads to the big question of who's going to drive, right? If it were me, for Audi, I would go for Carlos, Fred, Alex Albon, Sergio Perez, or even Nico Hülkenberg for the German tie-in. They need solid performers who deliver points to develop this car. They really, I don't think, need junior drivers to knock wings off and cost more money than they need to spend. They're trying to start their team. They need drivers that are veterans that know how to deliver points and know how to drive those cars and not knock wings off. And I think that would be the best move.
So not Mick Schumacher is what you're saying.
No. Although Mick would be, a good choice being German. But
I don't know. Not if I could have Nico Hülkenberg.
Yeah, I think because Nico's pretty fast.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing. And you would think, okay, well, that's a new team. Why would Carlos want to go there? Well, it is. And a lot of people are saying, well, but why would Carlos or Sergio or anybody want to go to Audi and be at the back of the grid? I'm not 100% convinced Audi's going to go to the back of the grid.
I think
Audi, if you look at Audi and their approach to Le Mans, their approach to GT racing, Audi doesn't do anything by half measures. And I don't think they're going to do F1 by half measures. And so I would not expect, if I was Carlos Sainz, I wouldn't snub my nose at a drive at Audi because I thought they were going to be at the back of the grid.
They're not Haas.
No. And I think Audi, unlike Renault, will actually advance faster in performance than what Renault's been able to do. Anyway, I interrupt you, Grace. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to add that, like, Carlos doesn't have a seat, so maybe that's why he's looking at going to Audi, right? Like, if your choices are Audi or you don't get to race next year, well,
it's Audi.
Yeah, right. So I think that's the other component to it here. What other seats are open that have a chance? I don't think Fernando's going to go. I don't know why. Like, I can understand Hülkenberg. That would be a step up. Carlos, it's Seidel, it's Audi, It's familiar. I can see that. But going from Aston Martin to Audi doesn't make sense to me. You're already at a team that is on the up and up. Why would you switch an up and up where you're successful for an up and up where you may not be successful?
Right. And Aston is moving to Honda. So it isn't like they're always going to be throttled back by using a Mercedes to not beat the Mercedes.
Right.
Like McLaren, could be. So if Aston moves to Honda, then that's, you've got an Aston Honda sort of works team. That's a great combination. And no, you're right. If I was Fred, I don't know that I would leave that. And if I was Carlos, I'd seriously think about going there.
Okay, so I agree. We all know my dream is to have Carlos and Fernando at the same team.
That would be
right?
the Spanish Armada.
That's the dream. So I love that idea. So I would love for them to be in a team together, and I don't care. Lancey boy, he's on a rolling contract. He can go wherever, whenever.
Yeah, Lance could go drive GT racing, Astons. He could become an executive at the company. He could work in the road car division, in the performance driving division. There's lots of places for Lance to go.
Be the reserve driver for Renault. Whatever, Lance.
Or Aston Martin. Of course, they got Drogovic, but yeah.
I just think, what are we doing here? What are we doing, Lancey boy?
If I'm Lawrence and I've got Fernando and I could get Carlos, I could have the Spanish Armada. What am I thinking?
I don't know.
I'm putting them both in. Lance, we'll find you a job. Okay, here's a office with a potted plant. Have a seat there, and we'll send some paperwork down. Something.
I will say, I think I've only watched 3 episodes of Drive to Survive, of the 6 or 7 that there are. We never made it very far, but we did watch the episode where Lance Stroll, shows up with his broken wrist. That is the most emotion I've ever seen out of Lawrence Stroll. I didn't think he was capable of that. I mean, of course he is. He's a human. It's his son, right? I get that. But it was just like, well, that's a person I've never seen. That person's in there,
Right.
There's a lot of tears happening there.
It's a soft nougaty center.
I know, right? Who is this guy, Larry? What's going on? So
what up, Larry?
Good to know he's human after all. Good to know.
But as I pointed out in the podcast with Paul, the issue with Lance, and I'll say it again on this podcast, is that in that episode when he was really struggling, it was killing him to drive, but he was like, but I just didn't want to hit the wall or anything. I just didn't want to disappoint Dad.
Mm-hmm. Problem.
That's the wrong reason to be in that car.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to disappoint your dad. That is absolutely the wrong reason to be in that car. The reason you want to be in that car is I want to win. I want to win races. I want to win titles, right? So that's why I think they should make that move. But anyway, we'll see who Audi picks.
All right.
Okay, comfortable cars. Melton says, in a display of emotion, Larry wipes his tears and then adjusts his junk. That's exactly right.
That's
Season 1. If you're new to the podcast, Season 1 of Drive to Survive, you have Lawrence Stroll sitting on a couch opposite of Claire Williams, and the meeting's over, and he stands up, and he's about a foot away from Claire, who's still sitting, stands up, stuffs his hands down in the front of his pants, and adjusts his junk. And that was left in Drive to Survive. And I saw this. What the hell did you just do? That is, talking about Christian Horner and sexting. Good grief, dude. Oh, boy. All right. Comfortable cars. There is no doubt that these new cars are stiff, stuck to the ground, and bounce quite a bit, more so in a couple of years ago than they do now. This makes things uncomfortable for the drivers and hard to see out of the mirrors when everything is vibrating so much. And you feel every single bump, right? They're stiffly sprung, low to the ground, sucked to the ground. When asked if the new cars should consider driver comfort, Lando Norris said this. He said, quote, could it be better? And was it better a few years ago in the old cars? 100%. There's definitely certain people who think it's not bad and that it used to be worse many years ago and all that stuff. But I think times have changed. I think we do complain sometimes, but certain things are also for a good reason, for our own bodies and the safety and health side of things. So I think there's areas to improve on it for sure. What's interesting to this is that he also doesn't think that the teams will pay much attention to the comfort level, and therefore he kind of thinks the FIA should be focused on the regulations to force the comfort of those cars. And he said, quote, "I think it does need to be improved a little bit because the teams just make the quickest cars and then we drive them. There's certain times when it starts to have a toll. It's definitely not as bad as what it was 2 years ago. Things have improved since then with porpoising and all this, but you still have to run the cars extremely low and stiff, and my body and my back of all and back and all of these things. And I have to do a lot now, which I didn't have to do a few years ago. I wouldn't say it's directly because of the car. I think a little of it's just naturally for me. I have to work on it. But I think things in the long term need to be improved, especially if I want to be here for many years," end quote.
Isn't he like 23?
Yeah, he's already. Oh, it's
Man,
my back.
I know, right?
So
Oh,
yeah, they're taking a beating, apparently.
Yikes.
I think Lando. I think you and I would agree here. I think Lando's right. No team's going to add weight or aero penalty just trying to make the driver smooth ride. That ain't going to happen.
Nope.
And the FIA's regulations should consider driver comfort like they focus. Do you remember a few years ago, Grace, when it was all about weight? Remember that? Mm-hmm. Remember Mark Webber practically starving himself?
Yes.
So he could be under a weight limit because of the negative impact on ballast it had in that car. And finally, the FIA had to step in and said,
Yeah,
hey,
like he's got to eat.
a driver's weight will be this. And if it's not that, you're going to add ballast to make it that, right? To make a healthy weight for a driver, because these drivers were literally starving themselves on diets. So,
I mean, it's the role of any regulation, right? Regulation is there to force you to do what you should do, but you aren't going to do, right?
Right.
We have stop signs because we should all stop and be nice and go, no, you. But that is not what we do. So we have stop signs.
That's right. That's right.
So I think he's right. And I think he's trying to phrase it in a way, right? Because you don't want to, we've all been employees, right? And we all have had management go, employees are never happy and they just like to complain. Maybe that's true. But also when we all you have 400 employees and we're all saying the same thing, I don't know. That seems like a pretty big sample. Maybe you should listen to it. So, if your drivers are all out there in some form or another, not happy with how they feel in the car, that is something. And the teams aren't going to fix it because that is not their priority.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Let's see what they do. This next one, I'm not going to read all of it. I was going to, and then I added the Verstappen contract thing. So I'm going to just breeze over this. I thought it was kind of interesting. Toto Wolff took a little swipe at Christian Horner. F1's had periods of dominance. With the most recent non-Red Bull version of that was 8 years of Mercedes dominance, right? Red Bull had 4 years before that, Renault before that, Ferrari before that. Formula One is about dominance, all right? And so when all the new fans came in on 2021 and it went down to the wire in the last race in the last corner, everybody thought, oh my gosh, Formula One's incredible. Well, that was an anomaly. Formula One really is about team dominance and always has been. For the most part. But Toto was quoted as saying, well, I don't want to fall into the trap of a fellow team principal from next door in 2014 and 15 who said we should change the regs because it's too dominant. He said, I think Red Bull have done by far the best job of all teams over the last 2 years, and credit where credit's due. I mean, they're literally disappearing in the distance as they want, and there's nobody else close. It's just that they're in a different league, and our sport is an honest sport. The best performance is being rewarded from machine to man, end quote. There you go. Yeah. Smacks of Ron Dennis all those years ago.
I just want to say that, we were searching through YouTube, right? We had finished watching the race Excel. Williams runs on an Excel spreadsheet. So we're just looking around for other stuff, and there's another content creator out there, and the tag to the show is Formula One is lying to you. And I was like, well, I need a little bit more. That could be, I'm pretty sure I can name 6 things just off the top of my head that Formula One is lying to me about.
Yeah, for sure.
You're going to have to narrow this down a little bit more. So, yeah, I like the Toto Wolff just well, I don't want to be really? Come on. Mm-hmm. I would never do that.
No, they will.
Yeah. So why don't you, one more thing that Formula One is lying to me about, right? All right, sure, Toto.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Oh, and before we get into Albon's cats, I put together just a little quick list. So for you veterans out there, you guys will know there will be a polite smile come across your face when I mention these races. For you new fans out there who haven't seen a lot of Australian Grand Prix, I was just making a list of a few of them that stood out to me over the past few decades that I thought I would bring up for you to either YouTube or if you've got F1 TV, maybe go and see if they have these races because these were really good Australian Grand Prix. For me, I hate to say this, no offense to Bahrain or Saudi Arabia, but for me, Formula One starts in Australia.
No offense, those races were boring. They were boring, and I'm a Formula One fan, and they were boring. I watch F1 TV because I like watching the little dots go around the track on my laptop while watching, the coverage because I find it's hard to like that corner is this corner, and you can't tell how far people are from each other. So the dots help with that, and then you know which in-car to go look at. Those dots were nowhere near each other. This was the most boring race of dots ever.
That's right. So Australia for years was always the season opener at Albon
Yes,
Park,
and we're just going to pretend this year it is the race opener because hopefully it'll be a more interesting race of dots in Australia than it was in these first two races.
Because the Aussies know how to host a race.
For sure.
They got that down. So for me, it starts in Australia because I'm an old school fan, basically. And I was thinking about past races and which ones were some of my favorites. And this is in no particular order, folks. The first one I put down was the 2002 Australian Grand Prix.
Oh, yeah.
Now, that may be remembered as the big 9-car pileup at the beginning, but I recall it as a source of real Australian pride. In an uncompetitive minority, the newcomer, Mark Webber, an Aussie, survived the wear and tear on his car due to the bodywork damage, lack of a top gear, and the much more powerful Toyota of Mika Salo behind him. He still finished fifth, 2 points in his debut Formula One World Championship points. The Australian crowd went crazy with Webber and fellow Australian minority team principal Paul Stoddart enjoying their own little podium celebration after the race.
Yes.
So it was great. Mark Webber, his debut puts points on the board in a minority, which is effectively like the Williams or Haas of today, right? So that was a great race. It was a lot of fun to watch. I enjoyed that. Let's see. The other one, the 2009 Australian Grand Prix could not have been better planned. Braun's newly formed team, which was bought from Honda for £1, had a 1-2 in qualifying and a 1-2 in the race, with Jenson Button leading teammate Rubens Barrichello in the Mercedes-powered Braun. Braun also made history by becoming the second automaker to win his first race after Mercedes did it in 1954. So that was pretty exciting. And man, that went all the way down the wire because in testing, they had the dual diffuser, and even in that weekend, going into that weekend, there were protests lodged, and that was challenged by the FIA for legality. And the FIA on that weekend of the race said, no, we think it's okay. They just outsmarted you guys, and thus started the 2009 championship for Braun. So that was a good one. And then, who can forget this one, Grace? The 1999 race that saw Eddie Irvine win. Huh?
Never, right. I mean,
crazy. I don't know if that's on F1 TV. If it is, go watch that race. It was crazy. The 1999 Australian Grand Prix. That was bizarre. So.
Oh, Eddie Irvine.
Yeah, you guys have to go watch that.
Oh, yeah.
That was good. That's what we need in Formula One. We need another Irish driver.
Oh, I think we're going to say we need Eddie Irvine. I don't think we do. I think we're good.
We need another Irish driver. There was Tommy Byrne. Definitely. There was Derek Daly.
We can have another Irish driver. I thought Eddie Irvine, we're good.
We're good.
There is only one. There's only one Eddie Irvine.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. All right, let's do some Albon's cats.
Oh, no, it went wrong.
All right, Grace. Hit me with some Albon's cats.
All right, so no surprise here, but it's going to be all about MotoGP. So the MotoGP season has also started. And this did tie into, if you watch the Alex Albon Behind the Grid, where he does talk about how he has like 13 cats and 2 dogs and a horse. Yeah, 2 dogs and a horse, right? And that it was funny because as we were watching it, because they announced that whoever's doing the interview, whose name I don't know, because it's just, because Jake Humphreys also does a one of these video podcasts with a lot of the drivers. And I always just mock Jake Humphreys because ever since he asked Alonso, like, how does it feel knowing that 95% of your job you fail, right? Because most of the races you enter, you don't win.
Right.
And Alonso, of course, being a professional, was like, well, it's hard and, you get through it, but that's what's hard. Me, I would have been like, Jake Humphrey, what does it feel like to be you? How much of your life have you failed? Right? Like, I could not take that level of like, oh, is this how this interview is going to go? You're going to call me a failure 3 questions thinking, in, Jake Humphrey?
Well, Jake Humphrey,
okay.
Didn't you used to call F1, but you don't anymore,
exactly.
do you?
Oh, now you're just doing this podcast thing with me and this guy whose name I don't know. But, I'm the failure? I don't think so, Jake Humphreys.
Doesn't Simon Lazenby have your job now?
Yeah, exactly. All the more reason that I am not the professional that these guys are, right? Again, Alonso just answered the question and moved on. I would have been like, wait, what job did you used to have? Because I used to know you from something else. It wasn't doing this, right? So anyway, but that's not the guy who does the Behind the Grid. So, but he was trying to have this conversation. I'm like, no. Like, the cats have multiple names. I mean, you have cats and dogs. They all kind of inherit multiple names. And like, no, those are the same cat. They have 13 individual cats, but they all have like 12 different names. It's like a Russian novel. So I'm like, no, just stop, sir. Stop. And it was just funny that I'm like, and of course Alex is like, I'm not really sure. My siblings have all these cats, and his sister and his mom just come home with like, they were supposed to get 1 cat, they get like 6 cats, and and so it was just really funny. He's like, no, I really don't know. I just know there's a lot of them, which is fair. So, but at the end, the interviewer asked him, like, if you could have an interview with anybody, who would it be? And he says Valentino Rossi. So I was like, what a nice way to finish this little interview here. So thank you for pointing that out. I was glad that
that's cool.
I did enjoy it. And Alex Albon is always a good time. It's always a good listen. And
we know Lando's a Valley fan.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's all the more reason we would like to have Albon at Audi with Carlos. I think that would also be a nice combination. So it would be a lovely pair together.
Wow.
And I will give shout outs, speaking of Valentino Rossi. So I often complain about the color of the dots, right? In Formula 1. The color of the dots in MotoGP, not so good this year. There are too much red, too much purple, except for Valentino Rossi's team, which are fluorescent yellow, right? Like highlighter yellow. So you always know where his team is.
Right.
Well, there goes Fabio. I knew it, right? Like, so... Digi Antonio. So it was just like, because they're bright yellow. And so you can always find their dots on the screen. You can find them on the track. I don't know. Everybody else is purple. Why is this?
Some shade of bluish purple. Something.
Right. Like, okay.
Is that Grassini? I don't know. Who is that?
I don't know. I mean, because Premac took away all the white. I'm like, why? What is this? Your white was what made this helpful for me to know. But anyway, somebody needs to be in charge of this.
I agree.
I could do it. So this is, however, not my Alex Albon's cats. What I wanted to talk about was, we've often joked about that early podcast where I thought, oh, I know, I'm going to cover some WRC.
Yes.
And then as we proceeded into it, I realized I don't actually know how to say any of these people's names because I've never heard them said out loud, and they're all from countries that I don't have that experience, right?
Right.
So, but I'm trying to finish it while like skirting away from it and just trying to end this disaster, because I have a lot of knowledge, but I've only ever read this knowledge and watched the races, and I don't know how you pronounce these people's names, and I don't want to mispronounce them. So, that aside, when Ducati Premac, their second team, they did their bike launch, sorry. The person who was like their announcer, like, oh, and here comes Todd. Yay, Todd, we love Todd, right? That guy?
Yeah.
He called Jorge Martin George Martin. George Martin.
George Martin.
I get it. If I looked at that, I'd go, oh, his name is George Martin. George R.R. Martin. I got it. George Martin, right?
That's amazing, though.
But you're the person who's hired to do the announcer job, and you never asked, oh, is that George? Is it Jorge? Because I mean, right, I'm sure you've read into that too, that some people pronounce Jorge like George like Jorge. Like, you can't just go, is it with a J or a G? It's Jorge, it's George. People pronounce it both ways. And so it can be confusing. And so I get that maybe I would look at that and go, oh, George Martin, how's it going? And not Jorge Martin. But they hired you and you never thought, maybe I should ask somebody, how do you pronounce this guy's name?
That would be important. And who knew all that incredible work that he did at Abbey Roads? And now he can ride a bike, too. That's amazing. That guy.
I was just like, there's a part of me that was like, well, now I don't feel so bad, right? Like, I George Martin. Yeah. But also, I'm not a paid professional. I'm just, some dude on a podcast that you all listen to week after week.
And it's not easy, Jari Matti Latvala,
Exactly, right?
Think about that one.
Yeah, right. So I just thought that was great. That was great.
Good.
So, yeah,
Love
George R.R. Martin, their new rider. And then I did want to just quickly, people may be like, what is your shirt? I mean, you asked me what is my shirt. So it's the Fabio Quartararo. First of all, I think it looks like, if anybody ever watched Space Coast Coast to Coast, I think it looks more like Brack than a devil. But Flip originally bought this shirt for himself, and it was several XLs. Because I get it, it's sports fit. Sometimes like sports jerseys are smaller.
Yeah.
It's European. I don't know what has happened to sizing in this world. This shirt it fits me. Yeah. I wear a medium. He wears a 2X large because of his shoulders, right? Like, I just was like baffled when we opened the shirt and he went, I don't think this is going to fit me. I'm like, I don't think this is going to fit anybody, right? So I now own
with sizing.
I now own a Fabio Quartararo shirt, whether I wanted it or not, because
that's awesome.
I'm the only person in this house that it fits. And Europe, what are you doing with your sizing, man?
I don't know. It's always so tough. People always think, oh, you get a T-shirt. But, I'm like 6'3", and I have very broad shoulders. And you think, okay, well, you order an XL, and it comes, and it looks like, I look like Pop's Racer in that thing, it's terrible.
Right.
My daughter, my 19-year-old daughter could wear it comfortably, and me, trying to get an arm or a shoulder, and it's ridiculous. I mean, what is going on? It's crazy.
I mean, yeah, as a woman, I often joke that like sizing in women's clothing is like, whose line is it anyway, right? The numbers don't matter. Who knows what that means? And even if you like look up the measurements, you're still like, well, I know what my measurements are, and I looked at your guy and it still doesn't fit. I don't know. You just guess and give your shirt to somebody else. But I don't know. It's just like, so men, welcome, I guess, to this world of like, whose line is it anyway of sizing? Because
so I guess now, to be fair to Flip, is that he truly is now doing a Fabio. He's shirtless. He's walking around the house shirtless because he's got no shirt on like Fabio Quartararo.
Who never wears a shirt. And I really think that him and George need to be friends. Like, they just need to hang out together and just never wear shirts together, because, yes, that is true. Fabio never does that. And, so, I don't know. Be careful if you're going to go buy some Fabio Quartararo merch. You need to go up, like, 4 sizes, apparently.
I'll take the 6XL.
Yeah, right? Like, I don't know. It was just like... I have a shirt because once I have a Senators hockey shirt because Flip accidentally bought 2XL kids, which is also like a mediums woman. So perfect. I got a shirt out of it because he ordered a kid's size instead of the adult size. But
that's like buying a pair of Huskies at Kmart in the late 70s.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
All right, one more story. Once my sister accidentally for Christmas. So I haven't been in a Target for years, but Target, the way the women's clothes used to be is they were like, the maternity clothing were right next to the like non-maternity clothing. Yeah. And there's no like demarcation, right? Yeah. It's like you're just, here's one set of clothing, here's the other set of clothing. So my sister for Christmas accidentally buys me pants from the maternity section instead of from my section. I don't notice. I put on the pants, most comfortable pants ever. I'm wearing around the house. I'm like, these are great. Where'd you get these pants? They're so comfortable. And my cousin goes, do you have something you'd like to tell us? And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, those are maternity pants. I'm like, Carla bought me these for Christmas. They're the best. I was just like, I'm only wearing maternity pants from now on. I was like, awesome. It was great. It was great.
Oh, that's awesome. It's like that goes beyond the mom jeans.
No, it was great. I was like 23 at the time, so it was even funnier
That's
because
awesome.
but it was just out of nowhere. That's totally my family. There was no sort of like warm up or anything. It was just all accusation. Are you trying to tell me something?
Yeah.
What am I trying to tell you? With your pants there. Well, I just got these. They're really comfortable. Mm-hmm. You got something you want to share? I don't know. Why are we talking in coded language?
Oh, man.
What did I know?
That's
They're
so
great.
funny.
I recommend
All
it.
right.
But, yeah, clothing.
I just got this in from Alpine.
Oh. They're out.
They
were in. They're out.
No,
They're in.
No, they're in. But they sent me an email while we were doing
They got
the
rid of
podcast.
Esteban.
No, but it's a preview of this week's race, and it says here are the highlights of their preview. Now, I'm not picking on Alpine because I will tell you that the two best groups for outreach and content to the
Alpine.
media is Pirelli and Alpine.
I agree with that.
And VCarb. All three of those guys send me information. It's consistent, always the same time.
Yeah.
It's always good content from their team. So big kudos to the marketing groups of Pirelli, VCarb, and Alpine. You guys do a great job. So this came out, but I do like the wording on this. It says, Bruno Famin looks ahead to Melbourne and reflects on the first two races of the season. Okay, fair enough. Also in this edition, Esteban Ocon and Pierre Gasly share their thoughts on the next opportunity to learn more about the A524.
How did you...
You know what we're looking for is an opportunity
learn something?
to learn more about this car. Not... You know what I mean? We want to know more about it.
It's a shit box.
Hat tip to those guys. That's great.
That's a great wording.
Whoever came up with that phrasing
It's
to
brilliant.
rescue that storyline,
It's just
chef's
brilliant.
kiss. That was
so
great.
Kudos to the
Learn
marketing
more about
group
the
of
car.
Alpine. You guys are on
Absolutely.
it. Because if you can make it sound like the two drivers who are very capable of winning races, they're both really good, are languishing in the back, and the motivation that you seem to come up with is they're looking forward to learning more about the car.
What is that whiteboard session? Oh, we can't see that. Oh,
What can we say? Oh man, imagine the crisis management sessions going on there is amazing.
No,
they must
Todd,
have had
we're not
Ryan Reynolds come in for that one.
We're not going to put shitbox up there. Stop suggesting it.
Yeah, and Ryan, unfortunately,
Yeah.
you're learning the hard way. Alpine's not Wrexham. Sorry, dude.
They're not in it.
I am so
They're
sorry.
not, but
Yeah.
thanks
All
for
right.
coming.
Thanks for playing.
You'll
Do we
get to
have a
learn more about the car.
Do we have a consolation prize for Ryan? That's right. All right, no shit headlines. Here we go. You wanted Max Verstappen, Red Bull, Christian Horner. You got it. Here it is. Max Verstappen reveals if he has ever urinated in F1 car as drivers get no toilet break. I don't think there is a world or alternate universe that I really want to know if Max pees in his car. It's just
Why is
not
this always
something I
a
really want
thing?
to know. I don't know.
I don't know.
Why is that a
Always-
thing?
people
Why
wanna
is it
know.
always got to be toilet humor? You know?
I don't know.
Poop and pee. Okay, well, it happens. Things happen. Do I care? Is it funny? No, it's not funny. Let's see. The other no shit headline. Christian Horner accuser appeals Red Bull probe and hires lawyer after F1 boss cleared by his team in sext storm. That's the headline. The next one. Christian Horner has terrifying amount of power at Red Bull, and more will surface after sex scandal. Ex-F1 ace warns.
Was that Jos Verstappen?
Or Ralph Schumacher, one or the other. Ralph's in everybody's Rolodex lately.
Or Jacques Villeneuve? Like,
Or
who
Jacques
is
Villeneuve.
this, like, ex-ace, F1 ace?
I kind of
that
feel like
said
Jacques
that?
has calmed down now that he's got married, but who knows?
I don't know. What does that mean?
I
Like,
don't know.
it's all relative, maybe, but...
Next, Christian Horner accused her angry and upset she was never shown full sext probe dossier, which cleared him of wrongdoing.
Okay.
Was it a German-themed sext?
No, why did you... Why?
Gotta go there.
We almost made the whole show without that coming up.
Didn't we? We almost
Almost.
did. We almost
Almost.
did. And finally, a non-Red Bull Christian Horner, Lewis Hamilton blasted and told he won't be able to contribute to Ferrari after move.
What?
That was from Ralf Schumacher.
Oh,
And
well, that makes sense.
that Lewis doesn't have the X factor that Max has.
What are you talking? Are you on crack? I don't
It's Ralph.
understand.
That's right. I think I didn't read the article. Here's what I think he's saying.
Okay.
Just as Vettel found out, just as Fernando found out, just as Charles is finding out, Ferrari is Ferrari.
I get
And
that.
it will always be Ferrari. No matter how big Lewis thinks or thinks he is, he's not bigger than Ferrari. And Ferrari is Ferrari. And I think what he's saying is you can go in, but it's not you're not going to go in and radically change Ferrari around you. It's just not going to happen, I think is what he's saying. Now, the whole X factor on Max thing, I don't know. The guy's got 7 titles, but I don't know what that's about.
How many do you have, Ralph? I don't know.
Yeah, he's a race winner. But the other thing is, I think it's also interesting because if there is this exit clause, you have to be thinking that Ferrari is thinking, damn it. If we'd have just waited, we could have possibly gotten Max over here.
That's right, Lewis. Just kidding.
Yeah, Lewis, we're just kidding. We're taking we're triggering our exit clause with you. We're going to get Max.
I was going through a tunnel. I missed that. What was that you were talking about?
Sorry, broke up. Yeah. My gosh, they're thinking, I could have had Max, and we doubled down for $100 million on Lewis when I could have gotten Max, who is young and would have been with us.
I don't know. I just think I'm just going to put this out there. I haven't been watching the sport as long as Lewis Hamilton has been. I think he knows.
Yeah.
I think he has some inkling of what Ferrari is like, right? Like, he knows who he's marrying, right? Like, I don't think that's going to change. And so, yes, Fred being there will definitely make a difference. And I think his presence has made a difference. But, Ferrari is Ferrari. I think he knows that.
It's like Pete says in our Patreon supporter, Pete says here in our audience, he said, Ferrari is Ferrari is Ferrari. Sorry, Tom.
Exactly. But I think he knows that. Right. I don't think he's going in there like, I don't know, busting in those barn doors or something. Like, I am here and I'm going to save Ferrari. I think he's well aware how this
tell him
works.
there's a new sheriff in town named Reggie Hammond.
Yeah.
Right.
Pew pew.
All right.
I don't think
That's
so.
my no shit headlines. All right. Hey, thanks to all our Patreon supporters that showed up in the audience, sending us funny and great messages. You guys are the best. Really appreciate you coming along and hanging out with us for this. It's always it's a neat element, and I'm glad that I switched to this platform because it's a lot of fun having you guys on board and interacting with us live as we're doing the show, and it's awesome. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, and Flip keeps threatening that he's going to donate just enough so that he can do this.
Yeah, that's funny. And I like Steven's comment in the chat. He says he's going to lower the new Ferrari over a Turkish opera.
Oh, exactly.
That's great. Yeah. So anyway, all right, guys, that does it for this episode. If you like the podcast, give us some love. Go over us, give us a good rating on your favorite. Podcasts in general. I was reading a report today. Podcasts in general, a lot of podcast hosts are playing with the numbers. It's getting a little weird out there. And so, share the podcast with your friends and other F1 fans you know. They may like us, they may not. They may hate us. They may not like the cut of our jib, and that's okay. We're not meant for everybody. We're an acquired taste. We get it. But if you like the podcast, go over and give us a good rating. If you want to talk about this podcast or any other issues, you can go to our website, theparkferme.com. Share your opinion. Just do it with decorum and civility, as always. No personal attacks. That's not how we roll. Everybody knows that by now. And then we will come back next week, if I can scare up Paul fresh off of the tarmac at the 12 Hours of Sebring, and I can scare him up, we'll talk about the Australian Grand Prix, and we'll review that race with the young and effervescent Paul Charsley, and then we'll be back with Grace. So, until the next time when we do this all over again, this is Todd, a.k.a. Negative Camber, saying so long, Grace.
See you next week.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over. I don't feel I've got to prove at all. I don't really want to prove anything. I started as an amateur with no idea or no intention of becoming world champion. I was curious to find out what it was like to drive a car fast, to drive on a certain circuit, to drive a certain type of car.